So, if we could have everybody's attention, we'll go ahead and get started with the 5:30 session. We might have a couple more commissioners roll in, but most everybody that we're expecting are here. We'd like to give you an update on the effort that we're in the middle of doing. The city's doing a new historic preservation plan for the city. The last one was in the 90s, so it's way past due. And Stacy Hanley with our office is here today with us tonight. She is the point person. She's been with us for a few months, and this is a great project for her to start with and run with. And she's going to kind of walk you through where we're at in the process, what we've heard so far, kind of some things that we're doing as far as looking at things with an equity lens, and what's left. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Stacy.
All right. Private health. There we go. Okay, I'm Stacy Hanley, the new urban designer with Development Services, and I'm going to share with you about the plan, as Jason mentioned. So he mentioned also that our last plan is from 1995, and it was called the Community Preservation Plan, an element of Des Moines' comprehensive plan. And a lot has changed in the city since then, and a lot has changed in the field of historic preservation, so it was time for an update. An updated historic preservation plan was also called for as a part of Plan DSM as one of their goals. And in pursuing that effort, the city went after a grant and received the grant to put towards the plan update. So the first preservation plan for the city of Des Moines, written in 1995, laid the groundwork for a preservation program and recognizes the importance of historic resources, partnerships, and tools to protect historic areas of Des Moines. This updated plan will build on that success of the previous plan and then continue that work. And this work will address contemporary preservation plan topics, including mid-century modern buildings, intangible historic resources, and creating an equitable plan. Leading the effort is the historic plan consultants from Kendig Keese Collaborative, and they have a sub-consultant who is then charged with leading the inclusion and equity portion of the project, and her name is Susan West Montgomery. Development Services staff are also involved, and the City of Des Moines residents in several formats. We have an advisory committee. We've been in contact with several stakeholder groups. We've had public input sessions. We have a group called the Community Outreach Cohort, which I'll tell you a little bit more about in the further on in the presentation, but that's an exciting new way that planning is trying to get further outreach beyond traditional methods we've seen in the past. And then we've had our survey participants. This is a brief overview of our schedule. Phase 1, the kickoff, is complete. We are in between Phase 2 and Phase 3 right now. We're currently reviewing the existing preservation program and also looking forward to the future of the program with starting to draft the outline of the new preservation plan. Phase 4 will see that preservation plan fully developed, and then Phase 5, which will be the completion of the project in the summer of 2023, will be the adoption of that preservation plan. A big effort recently, which you may have heard about, was our public input survey, which was online via SurveyMonkey. We're very proud to say it had 541 survey responses and 2 in our Spanish version. We provided it in both English and Spanish. And it closed on October 28th. It was live for approximately 1 month. This is our opening slide saying welcome to the survey and giving some information about why we're having the survey. The following slides are going to be a brief overview of what the survey responses were like. So question 1 asked if you lived in the city of Des Moines, and then there was a link to a map so that residents could confirm if they did live within the city limits. 82% of our survey participants lived within Des Moines. And then question 3, how long have you lived in Des Moines? 46% of the respondents have lived in Des Moines at least 20 years. So we were pleased to see people answering the survey did have a good history with the city of Des Moines. 53% worked within the city of Des Moines. The majority of respondents were female. And we had a nice spread in age ranges. 85% of respondents were white. And the outreach cohort that I'll go through in a little bit, we're hoping that that will be a way that we can get a more diverse and inclusive response to some of these questions and get input on what the future of historic preservation in the city of Des Moines will be like. So questions 8, 9, and 10 start to ask, how do you currently get information about historic preservation, and what kind of things are you familiar with? So this one was really intriguing in the fact that you can see about 75% of respondents said they were familiar with local historic districts, but far fewer, less than 20%, understood what a certificate of appropriateness is. So that's showing that there's a lack of education going on about all of the nuances and how to do work in the local historic district. So this identified an opportunity for education for the residents of Des Moines. And then in survey question 9 and 10, it started to talk about where you get your information. And so currently, residents feel that city website is the best place to get their information, followed by social media, and then third, neighborhood associations. Questions 11, 12, 13, and then 14, we had then 4 open-ended questions, talked about what places, events, stories have been lost, almost lost, or not appreciated. And this is just a handful of responses. The Weather Beacon, Center Street, streetcars, trolleys. We went on to ask, how would you acknowledge or celebrate those places, events, stories to ensure they remain a part of Des Moines for generations to come? And these are like lots of ideas. So we had mentions of creative uses of historic buildings, do not tear them down, create museums and displays, create art, have events, special attention to locations, little library, invest in neighborhoods. And then what specific groups or individuals should be a part of this process? And we had another nice big list there you can see. And we highlighted, this was a quote from someone's response, that every part of the city can help support preservation if it is truly a priority. And then question 14 was asked if you wanted to have additional information. And then at the end of the survey, we provided a place for them to put, would you like to learn more about this ongoing effort? If so, you can be part of our email subscription list. And we had 100 people say they wanted to hear more information. So we were really pleased about that. So now I think our email subscription list was at 8, and now it's at 108. So we got a lot of interested folks from this. So the next group that's continuing this public survey, public outreach, is the community outreach cohort. And the intent with this group is to address the lack of participation that has occurred recently in planning. We're finding it's hard for people to get out and get involved in the community. COVID, I'm sure, has been a part of that, but we've found less engagement, and our consultants have agreed in that assessment. So they propose that we create a group of 8 to 10 residents of Des Moines that would go out into their community, interview their friends, their colleagues, their family, their community, and get that one-on-one interaction and input. So it was community talking to community. It was not this other or person coming in from the city to speak to them. And from that, the goal would be to get a lot of candid and honest, open information. This is a new technique in the planning world. It's only been used in a couple of other communities, so we were a little bit of an experiment, and it's been really cool to see it come together. It has had its struggles as well. We had a hard time finding this group. So what the group ended up being was 8 people. We had a couple people decline, and we have 5 students from Hoover who are participating. And in exchange for that, they're going to receive some mentoring and some professional job shadowing opportunities. So that was their agreement. This is also a paid position, so they signed a contract saying, we're willing to put in this much effort, do this many interviews in exchange for an amount of money that will be paid through Kendall Keys Collaborative. So the group had their kickoff meeting initially here in this room, and it was led virtually by the consultants. And from there, they have been sent out into the community. I have provided as much help as I can with one-on-one virtual meetings or phone calls. Sometimes they're very responsive, other times they're not. But we did have a touch base a couple weeks ago, and they wrapped their session in a week. And we hope to have 10 additional surveys from these 8 people. So it's like a survey, but in much more depth, collecting stories and information about these communities. Another part of the effort is our equity inclusion audit report. And we assessed a total of 9 programs listed above, some in development services and some in neighborhood services. So we worked with neighborhood services staff to complete these. It was led by staff and then overseen by Susan West Montgomery, who is the consultant. The findings of the Equity and Inclusion Audit Report include the financial implications have unequal consequences on our programs, actual and perceived inequity in access and benefits, there are barriers to participation, lack of survey, as in historical preservation survey, limits inclusion of all stories, currently no means to prioritize equity and inclusion, and there's a lack of diversity in staff and boards. The proposed guiding principles moving forward were that the City of Des Moines, through its Historic Preservation Program, can play a role in creating a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive and accessible community, and is willing to alter its programs, policies, and projects toward these objectives. And the second one is the Development Services Department, which is responsible for administrating the city's historic preservation program, will regularly evaluate its policies, programs, and projects for their contribution, positive or negative, to exclusion and equity. Action items that came out of this audit report include reduce and or mitigate barriers, commit time and resources to public information, directly engage citizens in survey work, and be strategic in bringing funds to historic rehabilitation projects to benefit traditionally underserved communities. So our next steps are to get the results of the community outreach cohort work, which ends over the next week. And currently staff are reviewing the equity audit final report and existing program report. And then the next phase will be moving into then reviewing the draft of the final plan report. And with that comes some additional stakeholder and then public input participation sessions in the spring. Any questions?
Sorry, I was just trying to collect my thoughts. Can you go 2 slides back? Where's the process?
This one or this
Yeah,
one?
start at findings. Okay, and then one more ahead. And then can you go one more slide ahead, please? Okay, so I think my question was on the evaluation part, what's the frequency and how is that triggered?
The
mean-
evaluation?
Like moving forward.
Yes, on the equity piece.
Yeah,
Actually, go one more slide ahead. I think it's not the action item.
I think the plan, when it's finalized, will have goals in it that, I think some things that we'll be looking at least from my perspective, are some very early things to do would be translation of some of our documents into other languages. From a historic survey work perspective, where I don't think we've done in the past, the focus has been a little more architectural. I think there's an opportunity for us to look at some of the communities that haven't been analyzed and documented from a perspective of this is a neighborhood or an area that's important to this specific community. So I think as we look for grant funding to supplement city resources to do survey work, we'll look to address that. The other things I think that might come out of the recommendations in the plan would be also either creating specific funding programs or better aligning individuals that do live in our local historic districts to utilize some of the existing programs that we already have that can help with renovation expenses. So those are some of the things that I know that we'll be tackling that I expect to come in the plan document. But as far as like moving forward, having, point, I don't know that we'll get into that like every November or whatever, we'll do a specific review. But I do, one thing I've valued this exercise in this, doing this for just historic preservation, and I envision us looking at other aspects of planning and things in our, within our division that we work on, stuff that you see as well. Taking that equity lens and applying it to those things as well. So I don't want to commit to always looking at historic preservation, because one year we might be more focused on looking at how we, process rezonings or something along those lines.
Right, okay. And I think it was my question's two-pronged, and why I said, how would you evaluate and what would trigger that, is my next part was, is there a process that a complaint can kick off that evaluation or kick off, is this specific line in the code equitable? Is it creating this barriers? Because as a person that just got done running for office, that was one thing that I would hear a lot is we would complain and it just felt like, well, it's because of the rules or they're set this way, instead of just taking a step back and say, okay, these people are disproportionately being underserved and underrepresented. How can we make sure it is equitable by giving another $1,000 or whatever it be to meet people's needs? So that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Can we inbound complaints?
Sure.
And can the complaints kick off in an evaluation? So that's how we will be able to solve a lot of the issues that are reoccurring and go forward.
Yeah, I mean, if
more of a
anybody's-
statement.
Right, I mean, if anybody's aware of some, specifics, I mean, we can try, depending on what the situation is. I mean, is it related to how our, is it related to process? Is it related to code requirements? Is it related to outreach? It's going to, our reaction and how we address that is going to vary based off of what the circumstance is. So I don't want to get, can't say every time we're going to do it exactly the same. But what I really enjoyed about this process is that, or the value of it is it really, the first question you ask yourself is, well, what was the intent? What are you trying to actually achieve with this either requirement or process? And then talk about, well, where is that failing some communities? So it's always starting from the positive, in that there was a positive intent. It was well-meaning. But where is that hole? Where is that gap? And then once you identify where that hole or gap is, then you can start thinking, well, how can we fix that? So that could be For instance, with regard to a local historic district, maybe it's not getting rid of a local historic district, but maybe it's doing a better job of providing resources to those that need help navigating the process, or, making improvements, those kinds of things. So I don't know, does that help answer the question? Okay.
And I can speak.
Yes.
Sorry. And I can speak to the process a little bit. So the programs we assessed were the Certificate of Appropriateness process, which is how you proceed with getting authorization and approval to do work in a local historic district. Demolition of historic buildings ordinance, the landmark program, local historic district designation, National Register designation criteria, and then under neighborhood services was Blitz on Blight, home funds, improving our neighborhoods, and blighted properties rehab. And our consultant, who was leading the equity inclusion effort, she gave us a list of 6 questions we were to answer, which was what was the original intent, but next, how is it actually functioning? Who is it failing? Where is it failing? How can you improve it? And with that improvement, what could be some unintended consequences? So we did that for every single program up there, all 9, and we identified ways that they could improve. And this information then will feed into and inform the full historic preservation plan. And so some of the action items and goals that then go into the full plan will be formed from this assessment. But it was interesting to see some of the relationship between what we saw in the survey about a lack of education about what a certificate of appropriateness is. Even though there is a general awareness of historic preservation and historic districts in the city, there's a lack of connection between those things. And so we started to see some of that in our own assessment. How do we have public outreach and education so that it's a fair and equitable process for those who aren't familiar with city government and all the steps that go into applying for a COA or getting your neighborhood in a historic district, et cetera.
Or even the differences between being in a National Register designated district versus the local historic district. Because the National Register district is largely honorary. There's no real, unless you're using federal funds, there's no real teeth to it. You can tear a building down, for instance. And so I think there's also confusion on that because we have 3 local historic districts in Des Moines. We have way more National Register districts. And I can't think of the number off the top of my head, but anyway, so
I only brought that up. Equity is very important to my life, and I think it should always be top priority going forward in this country. But I think in the complaints that you'll start to hear and see, that's where we can make a lot of improvements and catch those folks that are typically falling through the cracks. So that's why I was just kind of not pressing you, but seeing if there was a complaint process, what triggers the evaluation, and if a complaint would trigger that too, because there's gold in those complaints, really. So.
But if you have, this process isn't over. If anybody on the commission has either groups that you want us to talk to, or have, specific things, whether complaints or let us know. I think we have a meeting coming up with the Chautauqua Park neighborhood that asked, had heard about the project and wanted to know more, so we've agreed to go to that. We've met with several other kind of smaller groups throughout the process, so we're not done doing that. Obviously the survey's closed, and just to get done with the project, we eventually have to move forward to like a drafting of the document phase. The advisory committee, we kind of glossed over that, is we worked really hard to get the advisory committee to be representative of the makeup of Des Moines, as far as like having representation from the different communities within the city. So we have a diverse advisory committee, both from like a race perspective, but also some diversity and perspective too. We have nonprofit, we have a developer, we have a couple P&Z commissioners, historians, but an individual has done rehab on their own, just a variety to try to bring all these different perspectives together. So we kind of glossed over the advisory committee's role, but they're really important. The mayor and council member Bozen are also on that as well. And we'll have several more meetings with them, and they've actually seen all this information too.
Can I,
And a compliment, because I don't want to feel like I'm being negative, but I think your findings and your approaches are really good. I was actually really surprised, so kudos.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. First of all, is this report available online? It's very helpful, it's very detailed, and I think that it would be really a big assistance if it were, if it's not planned
It's
yet.
not currently on the website, but we can definitely post it there.
That would be really, really terrific.
What we've presented so far has been a summary. The actual documents are still in draft form, so we haven't had the chance to really fully review those yet. So once that's complete, then we'd be able to share the actual full documents.
Well, that would be good too, but I think this would be helpful if that were available.
Oh, the presentation?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
exactly. I have one other quick question. It's a suggestion. I like when we're talking about local districts and certificates of appropriateness and so forth, I think the phrase lack of awareness maybe is, in my mind, preferred over lack of education. Lack of education is pejorative, but lack of awareness, I think it's more generic. So that would be a suggestion in terms of just a phrase. But my other question is this. I'm really interested in the work with the cohort works, the students from Hoover and so forth, and I'd like if you could give us just a brief idea of some of the surprises they've brought forward to you.
Some of the surprises include, we don't have the full assessment yet from what they have, but just working with them and the amount of enthusiasm they brought to the table was a surprise. I thought maybe there would be some hesitation, but we had a pretty motivated group of young students come forward. I actually went to Hoover and spoke to the IJAG, which is Iowa Jobs, I forget the full acronym, my apologies, but it's a group that helps get students ready for careers beyond school, and so I had a connection with Hoover and went and spoke to one of the teachers there, and I spoke to 2 of the classes, and when I was there, the teenagers couldn't really tell if it was hitting home, but later I got a lot of enthusiastic responses, and our docket of spots for the high school students filled up really quickly. So that was a bit of a surprise. So I was really enthusiastic about that. And I was hopeful that we would have a little bit more engagement with them moving forward, but as is with most people, and especially I feel like young people who are busy, their engagement kind of has come in, fits, and then it kind of slows down. So I'm excited that we're wrapping up. Everyone's getting really engaged right now. I think now that the deadline is here, we're really seeing a lot of action. So I'm excited to see what the surveys come back as. We've only had a couple of surveys submitted so far, so we haven't seen a lot of their work yet. But everyone has said that they have 10 surveys, so that should be 80 interviews to work from. And then their portion of the process, their agreement was to do this month-long work, which is a significant engagement. And then from there, they will then review the draft plan document in the spring. So that's when they receive the second half of their payment. So they kind of are getting it in 2 different chunks so that we keep them engaged. So then they're to review and provide commentary then. So I'm excited to see what we come back with, but it's been rewarding to get to work with the students at Hoover, so I'm enjoying that part.
That's a terrific idea.
Can I ask, I have 4 questions. We don't have to answer them all. If we can take notes and do it later, awesome. I guess my 4 questions are, Susan West Montgomery, she's out of Maryland, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. What % of respondents, because you identify people like set on the map where they are, what % of respondents lived in a historic district, local historic district? We know that what we're currently doing is inequitable. That's, I think, beyond challenge. The question I guess I have is, in the philosophy you're employing here, how is it proposed that we'll know when we're suitably equitable? And the last one I have is, what is the core focus of preservation as we're looking at it from this perspective this time? Like, for example, I used to live in Sherman Hill, so I'm familiar with it. The concept of Sherman Hill is we want it to be exactly like it was. Whereas in San Francisco, the concept is we want to ensure there's no access to loss. So you have the ability to modernize as long as you have the requirement there that you have access to tear back. How are we looking at it in this? Because I think that also drastically affects, I don't know how many times we've heard about J gutters versus half rounds, and how half rounds suck or whatever. There are significant issues when I can't replace my window for any less than $1,600 in Sherman Hill, that I can't live in most of it. So, and that affects how we actually view preservation as a function. So those are my 4 questions. I know we're out of time. If there's any of them you're willing to hit, awesome. If not,
Well, I guess the only thing I would add is that the plan isn't, like, the notion of, like, the design guidelines and how to implement them is more, that's taking it one step further. This plan is a little broader than that, as far, it's a citywide plan. It might suggest, revisiting the design guidelines or revisiting how you do things, but we're not specifically at this point saying, like getting into that level of minutia.
well, no, and again, not what I'm asking about. Sorry. So
Well, I just want,
Yeah.
I understand you. I just wanted to clarify. It's not, I don't know that.
My design guidelines, awesome. Not concerned. My issue is how we view preservation and what the function of preservation, definition of preservation is, will impact what those design guidelines are or impact how accessible an accommodation is. I'm curious, how are we doing it, number one? But most importantly, we say equity all the time, and I think in many ways to just point, it's not just how will we review it, but how will we measure it? We can say all day that we're not succeeding. That's clear. How will we know when we've sufficiently succeeded? That to me is more interesting that I'm not sure I've seen answers to.
Good questions. Percentage of respondents living in historic districts, I can get back to you on that. I know we have data about the zip code. I'll have to look further into the data to see if we can identify percentage responding in historic districts. Knowing quantifiably when we are equitable, I don't know if that's possible. We've asked the same question to our consultant. We have asked, how can we know we're hitting the target? That was one of the big things when we put together the outreach cohort. How do we get to the communities that didn't answer the public input survey online or have not come to the public input sessions? And at the end of the day, we opened it up to a group of people, and these volunteers stepped forward and were enthusiastic, and we've given them the tools to go forth in their communities and basically collect stories, find out what's important about Des Moines to them, a lot of placemaking, a lot of story collection, and not looking at just the architecture that was built by people with means, but instead looking at the places that make up the culture and community of all of the residents of Des Moines. And so one of the things Susan has told us is that we won't know for sure if this is as successful as we want it to be. There's not a great way to quantify it. If you know one, I would love to know. But we are right now doing our best. It's a bit of an experiment. I think she said we're maybe the 3rd community that is using this cohort technique. And so it's best effort to get out there and get the information and make it as equitable as possible. That's my current response. We might have a better response as we continue to get the information back and see opportunities to further improve. And then the last question I might turn to Jason.
Well, and I think we probably need to wrap up for the meeting. I will say that the just big picture wise, to answer part of one of your questions, what's changing in the historic preservation world, countrywide, not just in Des Moines, is the notion of looking at intangible history and not just tangible history, and the relationship of events and activities and things that have occurred at a place. And maybe what's important to the history of that place is more about just maintaining the general vibe of the place, and not so much this specific detail. Now, that doesn't mean that you should get away from having districts that you are into the detail on, but it's broadening the thought of what is significant. And so, more inclusively looking at significant to who and what. But anyway, I know we're running long, so I do appreciate everybody's interest and all the questions, and hopefully you enjoyed the presentation. It was valuable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. All right, we're just a little late, but I don't think that'll be a problem tonight. So welcome to the December 1st, 2022 meeting of the Plan and Zoning Commission. I'll first read the rules and procedures. The Plan and Zoning Commission is generally an advisory body to the City Council. The City Council will hold a public hearing and make the final decision on all matters before the Commission, other than site plans and subdivision plats, unless denials or conditional approvals thereof are appealed. Please contact the City Clerk or Development Services Department staff for details on council hearings. Applicant will be given 10 minutes to present the request. Proponents and then opponents from the public are then allowed to speak in that order, with each speaker allowed a maximum of 5 minutes. Applicant is then allowed 5 minutes for rebuttal. The hearing will then be closed and the Commission will discuss and vote on the issue. All comments are to be germane to the item under consideration, and speakers are to maintain a courteous manner. Items listed on the consent portion of the agenda will not be individually discussed and will be considered for approval in accordance with the recommendation in the staff report unless an individual present or a member of the Commission requests that the item be removed from consent and considered separately under the public hearing agenda. And do I have a motion to approve the November 17th, 2022 minutes? Chris?
I move, yep.
Thank you. All in favor, please raise your right hand. And abstentions? All right, thank you. I will start with the consent public hearing items. Item number 1, a request from Des Moines Metropolitan Wastewater Reclamation Authority, represented by Melissa Schick-Blarnd, for review and approval of a public hearing site plan WRF access and security improvements for property located in the vicinity of 3000 Vandalia Road for type 2 design alternatives A and B. Is there anyone on the Commission who wishes to hear this item? Anyone in the public? Number 1 will remain on consent. Item number 2, a request from Carrie Dunn for the following property located at 810 East Euclid Avenue, A through C. Is there anyone on the Commission that wishes to hear this item? Anyone in the public? Number 2 will remain on consent. Number 3, a request from Neighborhood Development Corp., represented by Abby Gilroy, for the following property at 2211 University Ave, A through C. Is there anyone on the Commission that wishes to hear this item? Anyone in the public?
Can I ask about the packet? Were there supposed to be drawings on this one in the packet, or was this just text? Because it said drawings were submitted, I wasn't sure.
Typically with the rezonings, we don't necessarily send out any concepts they might provide.
So this is just a rezoning? This
Yeah,
is
it's just a rezoning. We will ask for like a concept that if it does get presented, we can share with you, but at the end of the day, we're just looking at zoning. The design is not a part of the discussion.
Sorry, had something else in my head. Thank you.
Okay. Was there anyone from the public for number 3? Number 3 will remain on consent. There are 2 items on the public hearing that have been requested to be moved to consent. Number 4 is a request from Eastgate Plaza, represented by Norman Weinstein, for review and approval of an 8th amendment to the Eastgate Plaza PUD conceptual plan for property at 1514 East Euclid Ave to allow car wash use. Is there anyone on the Commission who wishes to hear this item? Anyone in the public? Do I have a motion to, thank you, Justin. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Number 4 will be moved to consent. What? Oh, are you abstaining?
Just abstain, yeah.
Oh, please raise your hand if you're abstaining. Thanks. I just didn't see you. Number 5 has also been requested to be moved to consent. It's a request from John Amberg, represented by Sean Stolt, for review and approval of a public hearing site plan for property at 750 Foster Drive for type 2 design alternatives to allow construction for a 245 square foot attached carport within 5 feet of the south side lot line when a minimum 10-foot setback is required. Is there anyone on the commission who wishes to hear this item? Anyone in the public? All right, do I have a motion to move number 5 to consent? Thank you. Oh, I think Katie was. All in favor of moving to consent, please raise your right hand. All right, number 5 is on move to consent. So for consent agenda, we have all 5 items. Do I have a motion to move consent? Thank you, Justin. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Thank you. And I think that's the end of our meeting. Do we have any other director's reports? Yeah.
No, I don't. I think last meeting we set the nominating committee, so hopefully you guys remember that the 3 of you that volunteered, and please work on that this month and into the next month. So that'd be it. Thank
All
you.
right. See you December 15th, everyone.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Next meeting, we will have another 5:30 session. It's the downtown plan that's been led by the partnership. It actually is also going to be an action item as amending it or adopting it as an element of our comprehensive plan. But just with the amount of information that should be presented, it's hard to tell them to do it in 10 minutes, so we wanted to do a 5:30 session. So hopefully you all can make it to the 5:30 session.
All right, thanks.
That's nice to see you, Kayla.